Okay, we are recording.
Thank you, Kim. And as we were thinking about that in the end of this past year, we came to this decision to look at the way of love, because we wanted to hold together these spaces where we were thinking about justice and thinking about justice broadly in our community. We were thinking about our commitments to racial and economic justice. And we were also thinking about our Christianity, right? We were thinking about our place as members of the Episcopal Church and what it means for us to walk in a way of love. And we wanted to not lose that thread as we went forward. And so in all of that context, John, would you care to share? Sorry, John, I'm putting you on the spot, but would you care to share what you thought when we sort of approached this concept of, hey, let's go dig into lament as a community?
Yes, and if can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And specifically, Dylan, sorry to miss
Can anyone else hear John?
Yes.
Can you hear? Yeah, I think they can. Can you
I
not
will
hear
work
me?
out why I can't hear John.
Okay.
I got it.
All right.
Michelle kept the headphones. She just gave me the computer.
That was a, I just fumbled the handoff because you asked, you remind me specifically what it is that you want me to talk about, because we talked for an hour and a half and you're referring to something specific and I'm racking my brain to come up with it.
That's okay. The beautiful part of this whole conversation, y'all, is that we are not going to have right or wrong answers in this discussion. So I was just curious, John, what came to your heart when we started talking about spending time and being engaged and reflecting on lament?
Well, a flood of things. One is that what you said, as far as we haven't given ourselves permission to, I haven't given myself permission to stop and rest, partly because as exhausting as it is to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, the really exhausting part is when you get to your safe place and give yourself permission to believe that you're okay, because that's when all your adrenaline leaves your system, and that's when it's not so much that is rest. Rest is not exhausting. Rest allows us to feel our exhaustion. It allows us to surrender to our exhaustion. So that was one of the thoughts I had, which is that we tend to push it away. I did my hospital chaplaincy at Georgetown University Hospital, and the Jesuit priest who was the chaplain there had come to hospital ministry from retreat ministry. And I said, wow, that must be a huge swing for you to go from retreat ministry to hospital ministry. And he said, not really, because in times of retreat and in the hospital, you're out of your normal routine, you're out of your normal clothes, you've got time on your hands, and all the stuff that you have been stuffing surfaces. And so rest can put you into crisis, retreat can put you into crisis every bit as much as someone awaiting surgery. And that was a profound insight for me. So that's one of the things is that it's tough to give ourselves permission to rest because of the stuff that will surface when we do so. But I think that one of the things that Dylan and I also talked about is I had heard once a distinction between true religion and false religion, that false religion says, do not fear, that which you are afraid of will not happen to you. And true religion says, do not fear, that which you are afraid of may well happen to you, but it's nothing to be afraid of. And I think that is a major part of lament as well, is allowing ourselves to process some of the things that we were afraid of that in fact happened, but also at the same time to have faith that they were ultimately nothing to be afraid of. So those are some of the things, and just what Dylan has referenced, the zooming pace robs us of those opportunities to reflect on loss. And yet,
John?
and yet, that's what we're invited to do.
Yes. So the Lenten meditation that the Episcopal Relief and Development put out, if you haven't seen it, I just want to contextualize it for everyone, is it goes through every day of Lent, providing a short reading. And in addition to that, it moves during those days through the 4 stages that you see on your screen right now. And so we are called into these 4 stages through this meditation in a process of reflection, in a process of really asking ourselves to be present in perhaps a way we have not engaged in a while. And to move through these stages. So I am going to be blessed to share this time with several facilitators. And as we consider and as we think about moving forward, I genuinely appreciated John's his sharing of the distinction between true religion and false religion, and because it is about engaging in those things that are frightening, right? And finding faith in the space where we also are sharing that moment with fear. So I appreciated this. So the 4 stages of lament are based upon a writing, and you can read this more in the Lenten series. They're based upon a writing that came out a few years back. And this is one of the things that was contextualized in that writing. It's just a blog post. It's not lengthy. And it is linked in the document if you're curious. But it is simply, lament is not despair. It is not whining. It is not a cry into a void. Lament is a cry directed to God. It is the cry of those who seek truth of the world's deep wounds and the cost of seeking peace. It is the prayer of those who are deeply disturbed by the way that things are. And John and I wanted to highlight this because we want to make the distinction between lament and despair, right? We are not hanging out in despair. We are hanging out with lament for a few weeks. And as we do that, we are going to have this schedule. And there may be some flexibility to this. We are still defining the facilitation roles, but John and Miranda and Mickey have all committed to their dates, and you'll see all of us engaging in this process of facilitation throughout this time. I know several of you are Richard Rohr fans and read his daily reflections, and I really appreciated the reflection that he happened to have this morning as I was doing some prayer time and getting ready and thinking about what we were going to be talking about today. Was really talking about how Christ leads and how Christ teaches, and as opposed to by lecture, it is more by display. And so the goal of this series is very much that we engage in this conversation together, and we are hoping that the way we have designed it will be a broader discussion. And so these first 2 weeks, we're going to spend 2 weeks talking about rest and encouraging rest. 2 weeks. And that's because it's important, and because we tend to be bad at it. Well, I'm going to speak for myself. I tend to be terrible at rest. And on Sundays, the Lenten Meditation series offers quotes from the Book of Common Prayer instead of sort of proceeding forward with the Lenten meditation aspect. And they really connect beautifully and well. So every week we are going to start by looking at what they are calling us to from the Book of Common Prayer on this Sunday as we reflect. and then looking at a couple of the themes throughout the reading from the week. And so I'm wondering if someone would feel comfortable, and I always feel comfortable calling on folks, but if there's a volunteer who would like to share this particular part of the Book of Common Prayer as we begin. If there's a hand, I can't see it.
I'll do it, Dylan. Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you this day all those who have died in the past year. We thank you for giving them to us, their family and friends, to know and to love as companions on our earthly pilgrimage. In your boundless compassion, console us who mourn. Give us faith to see in death the gate of eternal life, so that in quiet confidence we may continue our course on earth until, by your call, we are reunited with those who have gone before, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. One of the things I really appreciated about that is that it's in the Book of Common Prayer, and it reminded me that we do have resources that exist to guide us through lament and to guide us through grief, even in these moments where we are in situations unfamiliar to us. We have these. So every week, we will also be sharing just a couple of the readings on slides in case anyone didn't have access to the materials that week. But this is reflectively some of the reading that happened during the course of the week. And I want to pause here and just I want to be very clear. Like I said, if you want to catch up on the whole reading for all of this past week, you could probably do it in about 8 minutes right now. You don't need to. You can reflect on that later. And for anyone who did happen to look at these sort of the meditations throughout the course of the week, what struck you about them? What stood out?
Dylan,
Mhm.
can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me? I'm on my phone, so I'm a little disoriented. It's Marilyn.
That's it.
I really loved the first day. I guess that would have been Ash Wednesday when we were taken into Exodus, and we experienced the slaves, who happened to be Jews, making bricks, and the Pharaoh decided that not only should they make the bricks, they should go out and get the straw for the bricks. And I read it and I thought, where are we going to go with this one? And what I loved was that then the meditation took us to this place of essential workers, and that essential workers before the pandemic were already laboring with unequitable wages and probably difficult conditions, many of them more than one job. And then we throw the pandemic on them, and we've just said, go out and get your own straw. And it just took me to this place. As much as we've read, as much as we feel compassion and empathy, it took me to this place. And then, of course, they asked us to do something for an essential worker. So since it's Lent, and I'm not going to let my right hand know what my left hand did, I did go and do something that day, and it was terrific. So I loved that first day.
Thank you for sharing, Marilyn.
Dylan, I was struck by, it's Kathy. Hi, everyone. I was struck by, I don't know that I typically think about rest as a time for metamorphosis, right? And I also don't know that I have thought a lot about, the concept of crying out for a vision. So I really appreciated both of those ideas in the, I think it was the second Friday, the Friday reflection. Those are things to think on as I'm resting. But I think it's just powerful to me to think about rest that way, because that's, rest to me is sort of more about just being still and having nothing happen, let alone a metamorphosis. So I love that idea. Love that concept.
Thank you. Other folks, even if it's what you are reflecting on now as you read what's on the screen?
Dylan, I'd just like to kind of piggyback with what Kathy said. I think, very often our rest, for me, rest is kind of a not doing, and somewhat a waiting for the next shoe to drop. I'm still in this kind of, it's like that, that kinetic movement still happening, waiting to get ready for the next thing to happen. And I think, it's in our nature somewhat to plan ahead. And this idea of rest and that holiness, kind of reclaiming Kairos time, to be able to say that this, this moment really is that moment where God is dwelling. And so I think that it's a beautiful thing to take 2 weeks for rest.
It is. And it's a commandment too, right? Like rest is our commandment. We're going to talk about how rest connects into our baptismal covenant next week. And I was really struck by something, and maybe some of y'all were struck by it also. You were talking, Mickey, about the that like rest as potentially waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting, right? So what's the difference between rest and waiting? Is there a difference? I mean, there doesn't have to be one, but
Dylan.
yeah. I saw Daphne. I don't know who else spoke, but.
Hi, Dylan. I'm not answering your question, but I did want to share that one of the things that struck me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that struck me on this slide, and I have to say, I am filled with lament as I read it. As this person, Sandra Montez, says, I wish I could still do that when she's talking about resting. I wish I could go into my room and make everything dark. But probably like many of you, I can't. Not now, not during the pandemic, not when the weight of survival on my back, not with video after video of my murdered siblings, not with my brown son driving without me. And I thought, resting is such a privilege. Resting is such a privilege.
I think that's a good moment, Mickey. All right, I'm just before you speak, Mickey, I want to be clear that I also, I mean, I know we're Episcopalians, I get that, but I am not called to order. So we do not have to go one at a time, y'all. It is okay. If we unintentionally speak over one another, we will give each other permission to pause and come back. It is okay. I don't have to call on you. We can be organic. We can be messy. We can figure out how to do this as we go along together. But Mickey, I appreciate your raised hand. So Mickey.
It doesn't happen very often. Take advantage of it while it's here. Well, you asked first, the difference between wait and rest, and I think that's kind of a full, meditation in and of itself. But very often, again, waiting is sort of, it says wait on God many times in the Bible, but I think that when I wait, I'm also anticipating in some way my next action. And in rest, I think I'm more anticipating God's action. And so that, again, what Daphne said, that rest is really privilege. And this is what the Sabbath teaches us, that rest is a justice-seeking moment. In Old Testament and Hebrew scriptures, rest was a time where the fields were leveled. The rich rested, the poor rested. Everyone was able to have a time that was just sort of a leavening agent to remember that all were God's. And so, rest is sacred.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about the difference between rest and waiting as well, and that kind of one of the in some of kind of my own work that I've been doing, and then also the second meditation, the author talks about kind of getting through it one day at a time. And so something that my therapist keeps telling me is that I have to be in the present, which I am really, really bad at. But we've been talking about kind of the connection between being in the present and being in one's body, because that is the only place that your body can't go to the past and can't go to the future physically, which I'm still kind of processing. But anyway, just I've been thinking a lot about like how rest can look a lot of different ways, but for me, like it's a lot about learning how to get into my body and being in my body versus like in my head and the swirlings that are so often going into my head. And so that's just kind of something that's been mostly swirling in my head. I still haven't managed to get that knowledge and that understanding into my body, but I'm trying to.
Yes, Miranda, I can associate with that. In order to rest, you have to give up something like the clutter in your head. And so I strongly believe just what you said. It makes a lot of sense to me.
All right. I am going to challenge y'all for just a moment to think about how we socially construct, which means build by sort of collaborative consensus. That's a very simple definition. What rest means. Because what I hear is a lot of discussion about quiet. I hear a lot of discussion about reflection. And I'm curious if we challenge ourselves to think about what rest means, how we might expand our opportunities for rest. And in doing that, we're going to ask everybody, we're going to split out in 2 groups. All right. And we're going to be entertained in that process by my fumbling through breakout rooms. That's just going to happen. But we're going to, in those 2 groups, group 1, when you split out, you're going to have the responsibility of reflecting on synonyms for rest. And I call to you, those who have a spirit of following the rules, Your job is to reflect on synonyms for rest. Keep them at it. Okay. And group 2, whoever is in there, rule keepers, I'm grateful for you. Your job is going to be thinking about examples of rest. Okay. So those of you who know that the Spirit calls you to keep other people aligned with their purpose, you know your purpose. and I am grateful for you because I am terrible at that. And this is what we're going to do. Okay. So everybody can see on the screen what we're going to do. We're going to split out into 2 breakout rooms. Whoops. Sorry. Sorry, y'all. I can't actually see my mouse half the time right now. And then we're going to talk about what this was like. And as we do this, I am going to ask you to keep in mind that there aren't right or wrong answers, but there are topics that I'm asking you to focus on. So we're trying to split these 2 groups. That's kind of important to our follow-up conversation. And here we go. You're going to go into either group 1 or group 2. And give me just a moment. Breakout rooms. All right, here we go. I'm going to bring you back in 7 minutes, okay?
I'm going to put myself in a group. I'm still her co-host, so put me out. I get to choose.
Completely, Kim. You get to co-host, you get to choose. It's all on you.
And when I come back, I'm gonna pass on co-hosting maybe to John or somebody. I've got to get down to the church and do.
Oh, yeah.
communion, so, okay.
Totally. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm glad to see you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. Bye.
Okay, bye.
I think I am.
But if you have a
Hey, Kim.
Yeah.
I take it you can't get anywhere.
Yeah, I can't. Darn it.
But here's my question for you. So what are your synonyms for rest then?
I wanted to go in the other group. Oh, I, like you, find rest a really hard thing to do. So I was trying to think. Rest to me is let me contemplate on that a minute. You know, my first response was an escape, a way of getting away from the world, away from things that tend to bog me down. But then again, rest is also a meditation, kind of listen, kind of hear where I need to be, what I need to do, and taking that time to listen, not to just make up my mind as to, okay, I'm gone, okay, God, you're calling me on this one, let's go. I've found in my life that I'm an ADD helper. I go where I think I'm needed, where I think I'm, oh, let's go try this, no, let's go try that, and I don't It doesn't take a lot of time just to be still, to be silent, and to listen. It's hard.
I think one of the things about rest, and we were kind of getting there as we were talking, and I was grateful for this, is that we culturally conceptualize rest in such a specific set of ways, right? Like, if you're resting, then you must be able to be physically inactive and, or be at your own pace, and I think one of the things that I have realized as I've been sort of preparing for this process, no, keep the breakout rooms open. Oh, they're automatically set to 4 minutes. One of the things that I have been realizing is that rest doesn't have to be less active, right? Rest can be, what are the things that I do when I'm in a prayerful place? Because for me, rest is prayer and prayer is rest. Also, I realized that this computer is going to die soon too.
No.
I know, right? I'm like, really? I'm gonna move the whole table to accommodate the fact that it needs to be plugged in.
There you go.
So it's really interesting to me. So they've had about 4.5 minutes so far, so I'm just gonna give them a few more. But what about you, Michelle, who's standing in the corner of the kitchen after I've stolen her computer? What are your synonyms for rest? Crochet.
Oh,
I was thinking about
Pisankis.
you and Sankey.
Yeah, Pisankis. I hadn't thought about that one. That's, yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
Meditative.
Well, is
Yeah.
meditation a synonym for rest?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be. All right. I am going to facilitate these breakout rooms and just say 1 more minute for breakout rooms. I got Miranda. She's like, Miranda says, it only says 30 more seconds. I was like, Miranda, you're fine. She's perfect. Oh my gosh.
I love that girl.
I know,
have
she's so good at like paying attention to the details that I failed to even recognize exist.
And she's bringing me into this century kicking and screaming.
Nice. Absolutely.
What's a Google Doc? What's a Jim Jab? What's a what?
She's brilliant. Love
She
that
really
human.
is such a gift to us.
Oh my
such
gosh,
a
I
gift.
know. All right, so say one more thing. All right, please. All right. Unfortunately, I am just going to have to pull them out of their breakout room. So I gave them 2 heads up.
Okay. Like I said, the language we have learned this year.
I know, right?
Mute, breakout rooms, what is this?
Here we go. All right, here we go. Everyone, welcome back. Wonderful. Looks like everyone is coming back. Escape. I don't want to do that. Hang on here for just 1 minute, y'all. For some reason, very interestingly, I am unable to see the option to back to our PowerPoint. Here we go. All right, so here was our assignment, temporary though it may be, and we have just a few minutes to debrief it. First of all, may I ask for a visual read, those of you who are on camera, how is it to do breakout rooms, 2 groups, kind of kept the group large, lots of folks to talk, space to be quiet if you want, seem to work okay? Wonderful. We'll be trying to do, when we do breakout rooms, something that's a little larger like that so people can choose to engage or step back as they wish. And I'm curious, our synonyms team, what did y'all come up with? I know we have people among us who are natural recorders of things, so.
I wrote down some of them.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
don't know if I'll completely capture them, but being with nature, being with God, quiet time alone, solitude, not having input. The example was given of walking or running and not having a podcast going.
Yeah, quieting all of that information flow is what I hear.
Allowing self to be empty.
Okay.
Recreation.
Ah,
Recreation.
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 Nice.
Move like 2 things. One would be recharging your batteries, but maybe that isn't the best because of the draining nature of the
Yep.
Becoming diminished in energy, but rather being plugged in to a source of energy.
Thank you.
Let's see, letting go of tension physically as sort of a vestibule to rest, and rest as an active process of healing.
Okay.
And that was in the context of like illness, cancer, or things where rest becomes, it's part of a survival list, if you will.
Yep. Absolutely. Is anyone else interested in sharing any other thoughts for synonyms of rest?
We talked also of idleness, and that you know, that kind of, we're programmed in a way to believe that it's a bad thing, that not doing is a bad thing.
Right.
A story that tied a little bit to the Puritanism that we've all inherited, you know, that, or a lot of us have inherited. My father-in-law is a retired Marine Corps colonel, and he's always busy. And we would go down to Key West for vacation, and I would sit on the dock and just stare at the water and feel guilty because he was so busy all the time. I just couldn't do it. And it finally dawned on me, if I just put a fishing pole in my hand, even there was no bait on the hook, I just sat there with a fishing pole, everything was fine because it looked like I was doing something.
Oh.
but it was so funny that I felt like I had to look like I was doing something, even while I was on vacation. It was that's that Puritanism that just sucks the joy out of rest.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, John. I want us to take the time to make certain that we hear from people who have cultivated our examples of rest. What are our examples of rest?
I took notes so I can share some of them. An interesting question that sort of came up right at the end was whether rest is a state or an action. And so are the things that we named as examples kind of crutches to reach a state, or they rest themselves? But some of the things that were shared were reading, hiking, walking, meditation, watching an old movie, playing fetch, splitting wood, listening to classical music, silent retreats, doing nothing, those sorts of things.
Doing nothing. What a great juxtaposition. Doing nothing. Thank you all for taking that time and for working together to think about those things. What I would like to point out as we move into our second week is that nobody gave me a time limit on how much time needed to be taken to achieve rest. Nobody said rest requires X amount of minutes. So in the context of that conversation, when we think about how we achieve rest and we strive to meet that component of our, really the component of our baptismal covenant that requires that we hang out in rest to be able to accomplish the things that we say we will do in our baptismal covenant, and we're meeting that commitment, that it's not so much about vast amounts of time as it is about intentional choices that we make about what comes next. So as we sort of step forward into this next week, I want us to think about anything you thought of when you were listening that didn't sound like what you expected. Was there anything in there that surprised you? Did it surprise you how someone else framed rest? Because I think one of the important components of our opportunity right now to reflect and to be in rest is to think about the fact that maybe there are ways to be in rest that other people have thought of that we have not. And I want to invite you to really think about that time component, because if we think about folks who are in a position where they are essential workers and maybe don't have a lot of time right now, that does not mean that they are, or that we, or that I, as a human being, don't have access to rest. Maybe not rest as we might contextualize it as a 2-week vacation. And if rest is connecting with God, maybe rest happens after I lay my head on the pillow and spend a few minutes in prayer. Right?
Can
yeah.
I say something? When Miranda was just talking about the things that we associate with rest, chopping wood, those kinds of things that are very physical activity, right? But it made me think, I did this workshop yesterday on the Dharma of aging. And it just made me remember that, very often in our meditations, there's a mantra or something that we repeat. There's one thing that we can center and focus on. And very often our rest is in that thing, that one thing we can do to focus our mind so that everything else kind of falls away. And so it just makes me mindful of the need. I mean, we have our Book of Common Prayer, but we've spoken about this in committee, the need to really offer ways of praying, things that we can do so that we can center ourselves and find that focus and place for rest.
Thank you, Mickey. And that is crucial. And next week, I think that y'all will be spending some time really considering kind of exactly what Mickey's thinking about. We're going to return to this topic of rest And we're going to consider, as we go forward, loss and restoration, right? What is it that we do to process loss? And what are we called to do to process loss? I think y'all will find the meditations this week very interesting in terms of reflecting on how did Christ process loss? How do we process loss as human beings in the time of COVID? And then what does it ask us to do in terms of restoration? So we'll be having those conversations next week. And again, I just want to invite you deep into this process. If you all have reflections or thoughts that you would like to share that go beyond what we've spoken about today, I want to invite you to stay on. We'll leave this space open for a little while for folks to reflect and talk. I think we're going to time limit that and say we'll leave this space open for a half an hour to reflect and talk. And in the spirit of rest, I want to respect your time and I want to say thank you. This is a really beautiful opportunity for us all to gather and for us to do the work collaboratively of adult education and Christian formation. Having Koinonia come together with our leadership and our pastoral care team. And I am so grateful that we are in a space where we are collaboratively seeking to support and love and learn with one another. So thank you all so much for this time. And I'm going to ask John to pray us out. Keep it brief.
Thanks be to God. Amen.
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 Thank you all so much. And anybody who wants to stay and hang out and think about rest for a minute collaboratively, feel free to do so. And if anybody has any feedback they want to offer me, feel free to do that as well. Oh my gosh, I'm having a moment, but you can connect with me through the church office and they will forward my email to you. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Blessings, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Dylan, I'm gonna hop off because I gotta go be a greeter for Tiny House. But
Wonderful.
I loved that sentence you said, rest is not about time, but, and then I lost you. Not the
the spirit of that was really rest isn't about time limitation, right? Like we can achieve rest briefly. Rest does not have to be the miracle of a 2-week vacation.
And then you said something about, and it also might impact what
I don't know. I'd have to go back and
do.
Yes, absolutely. It is about what we choose not to do.
Right.
Right. Fortunately, we're recording, Marilyn. So.
I think what that brought up for me was I block off a huge amount of time in the morning for quote unquote quiet time, but man, do I fill it up with stuff coming in my head, reading meditations, doing all this stuff. And so this is such a wonderful reminder that while I have set aside the time for rest, it feels like a lot more doing rest than whatever else we might come up with as another. I just loved how you noticed the verb that we attach the verb doing to rest.
Right? Doing nothing. That's such a great juxtaposition in the true sense of the word juxtaposition.
Oh, good Lord, help us. On that note, I got to go do some stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
Go do Tiny House. Love you. Thanks so much. It was great.
Hey, everybody. I am so grateful for y'all. Thanks everybody to just for being present, for sharing, those of you who shared. I just thank you. It's really wonderful to see everybody here.
Thank you, Dylan. This is great. It's going to be great, and it is great. I had one little thought that when we were doing our synonym thing that occurred to me when our family was having a really difficult time I had this kind of image of myself resting in the hand of God, which at that point was just totally this community. And because I'm that kind of, first child controlling type, I was not able to do that at this time. And so that kind of not controlling things is a big part of rest for me. So just want to throw that out there.
And I like that, resting in the hand of God, regardless of what I am doing while I am in the hand of God, I am still resting in the hand of God. Yeah.
Dylan, will you stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you so much, Dylan. And I put this in the chat, but I noticed that the reading for tomorrow, oh, fiddle-dee-dee. Just so you all know, I put a virtual background behind here because my background would be so distracting. You don't want to see it. It's 40 years worth of photos. So I'm working on a book. So there's this passage that we're reading tomorrow in the ERD document that you shared, the meditations, Dylan, and it's from the book of Luke 24. And I'm sorry that George Hayho is not on here right now, but I noticed that he and others mentioned that Luke 24 is their favorite chapter. And the micro practices that came to us today mention reading a book of the Bible, and this particular chapter, Luke 24, was mentioned today, and it is a beautiful chapter, and I just love that linkage between the two. It is beautiful. Thank you so much, Dylan. This is beautiful.
And if everybody's okay with it, I'll stop presenting so we can, or stop recording, excuse me.